the capital expenses of opening up a nuclear plant, it is quite expensive. However, the operating expenses can compensate for this, as it is much lower than that of oil and gas. This is why nuclear is still the nuclear option is still the best strategy. We are also disposing of disregarding the coal and the two coal energy sources, as well as the oil, as these are reaching the end of their lifespan and life cycle. This is why opening the nuclear plant would also be able to address the community in terms of improving their knowledge and their skills regarding operating within these power sources, as we'd be able to improve the level of knowledge and education from artisans' point of views, as they're going to improve their method of approaching these different challenges. We're going to use the in-house power sources as our first option, and if this is not viable, we then move over to Eskom as the national grid, and thirdly have diesel generators as if this need be to go to this instead, if the in-house power sources and help us. The cost can also be written off over time, and this is because we're going to be implementing a very future-orientated strategy, which will be able to compensate after a number of years by improving the efficiency and technology.
Okay, before we move on to problem 3, one thing that I just wanted to mention about problem number 1 was just to complete the force field analysis for the pros and cons. The con of actually having a nuclear power plant is that using your plutonium and uranium, it actually degrades to a radioactive point. So after that, we're going to look at environmental technologies to actually find a way of safely disposing of that material. And one of the best options would be keeping such a containment device that it wouldn't allow it to emit radiation. And the thing is, the reason we didn't choose strategy number 3 the reason we didn't choose strategy number 3 was because there's no use in having 2 nuclear power plants being built at the same time when we realize that that we need another 1,020 megawatts of power in the upcoming years, because we expect our power usage to increase by 10%. And lastly, it wasn't actually considered by Amango, but one of the best things that we should do is look at more renewable resource power sources. So actually look at things like solar panels, wind turbines, hydroelectric power. That might be a better strategy to decrease carbon dioxide emissions and increase efficiency at the same time. Okay, so
Team Evolution, thank you so much for the presentation. You have made the political risk management your first priority, and you're saying as a board member, I should actually address that. I'm just concerned the mining charter has just been published, and I understand the ethical dilemma regarding the whole window dressing thing. However, I have a duty as a board member to protect my shareholders. Have you considered the risk this suggestion will have to my shareholders? And have you also looked at other options, how we can actually defend ourselves from implementing this from the mining charter?
Okay, so the impact of the mining charter on the shareholders is actually, it's in some sense, it actually forces us to provide dividends to our shareholders, in the sense that we need to use a portion of our turnover and profits and give that out as dividends. The only problem is it's preferential to those that are once disadvantaged. So the issue there is that we'd actually lose shareholders that were not previously disadvantaged just because of their state and circumstances at the time. So that's why the main reason we wanted to come together as a body, as an employee organization, and try and get the mining charter retracted. It is a process, but I think that might be our best option actually going forward, to try and get the mining charter rejected in that sense, because it is negatively affecting us internally, it's negatively affecting our shareholders and our stakeholders on a broader basis, because now we have less profit to actually give out to the community. We're already doing social responsibility, and the main reason that the mining charter and law is not necessary or redundant is because it's putting extra strain on the company. So it's just shareholders, but it negatively impacts us as a company.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the level of detail I think you went into on some key ethical and political pieces. Given from a timing perspective that you initially started with the slide saying these are not in order of priority, and from a numbering perspective, we saw them a bit differently. I'd like to give you the opportunity to wrap up what your priority is and a recommendation on the 3 you haven't covered yet, but literally you have 3 minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
I also think you should just flick through the rest of the slides quickly.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And I want to hear the other guy speak.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. So quickly address problem 4.
Okay, I'll do question 4. So Mango is deciding whether or not to accept the acquisition or not. And our recommendation is for them to decline the acquisition. Just a few main points is, the first point would be South Africans would lose jobs because of this acquisition. A second point would be Vendanta recently had some. Okay, move on. Okay.
Okay. So problem number 3 was basically we are looking at our dividends versus investment. And the thing is, we're looking. Our personal opinion is that we should invest and pay our dividends at the same time, because our flat cash flows actually allows for that. Since we have over $5 billion US dollars in cash flows at the moment, and then we can always use the profits that we currently have to address that. Then problem number 6 was our corporate reconstruction and reorganization. And basically what we're looking at over here is to try and upgrade our credit rating to investment grade. And basically by doing this, we need to lower our gearing, which is already currently 1.06 to 1. So in order to do that, we need to maximize efficiencies, and all the other problems relate.
Thank you. So then I have a question on, you're not going to go with the offer, so noted, but the one with regards to the corporate reconstruction and reorganization, how do you recommend we actually action that from a priority perspective, given that we've got a number of talks in place? Per your previous presentation, Canada was outlined and we've got different business units to unbundle.
Okay, so basically now we're just looking at improving our gearing, as I mentioned earlier, and that comes back to problem number 1 and problem number 3, where we look at the joint venture. And the thing is, we need to try and improve our efficiencies and cut costs, because as mentioned, Amango has reached their limit in terms of actually increasing equity and issuing shares, and you can't take out any more debt, otherwise that would just put us back in our previous state. So we're looking at getting our gearing ratio below 1 to 1, so our equity higher than our debt. And in order to do that, we need to maximize efficiencies in the sense that we need to invest in, like, for example, the joint venture in Canada. That would add more to our profit. By adding more to our profit, we could put that into retained income and thus increase equity. Once that is at a low risk state, we would actually be able to regain our investment grade rating.
Hi. I'm trying to see the person behind it. Yeah, in view of, in terms of your chosen strategy for investing in climate interventions, you have chosen strategy number 1. Can you explain to me as to why you have done so in view of your balance sheet, not in view of why it is good?
Okay. So in terms of our balance sheet, we have a lot of money in retained income, and we have a lot of assets at the moment. So in terms of funding and actually being an asset, I think the nuclear power station would add the most to our total assets. And the reason we can also dispose of our other assets, you know, our coal mines and our coal mines and our coal power station and our gas power stations, is because the solvency ratio is currently at 1.94 to 1. So we would be able to use that, dispose that, and fund the other asset, which would actually add more value in the long term. Because, as I mentioned in our previous presentation, the thing is we need to get our assets to sweat, and nuclear power is the most efficient. So that's why.
Okay, and then in addition to that, the reason we chose nuclear, other than the fact it produces the most, in our previous case study, we talked about product beneficiation. And the biggest weakness of it is Eskom because of the lack of electricity. But because of this, we can benefit products. And as we know, in China, new legislation enforces them to either buy products of high beneficiation or produce less. So this would be a good opportunity for us to sell our products to them and make our money back in the future.
Just an ethical question. The CEO declined the offer immediately without doing a proper due diligence. How would you respond to the board on that? Assuming that the CEO is sitting at the board at the same time, but how would you do that from an ethical point of view? Do you think it's ethical or not?
Regarding his
decision to decline it without doing any further review on the decision to decline the offer from VR? Do you think it's ethical or not?
Well, our suggestions before were, we do think it's ethical because, as I said, if they do take the job, they would lose South African employment. Other than that, if they did take the job, recently Vendanta's had some bad UK press in the UK, and they would also be losing sales. But other than that, it would be unethical to back Vendanta, even though they've had this bad reputation, which would make us have an even worse reputation.
On top of that, just not so much from an ethical point of view, but one thing we didn't actually mention was the anti-competition board, which would actually prevent them from dominating the market. So really, an acquisition of that sort wouldn't increase our market share as much as we would. So we'd be gaining bad publicity whilst not actually improving efficiency. So we wouldn't want that in our company.
It's simultaneously important to convey this message and the decision that we as the board have decided on to all stakeholders involved that would be affected, to make sure that they understand that it is not from a central and centralized point of view that we are making this decision independent of any other factors and issues that may be considered. However, this is currently the best decision that we are making that will in the long run effectively benefit and be advantageous to the rest of the stakeholders.
Do you think, because the CEO declined it immediately, do you think that it's correct that he has that much autonomy to make a decision that affects so many shareholders? Because that's really what I'm asking. I think your decision making is correct. I think to decline the offer was the right decision, but I'm asking from a governance and ethical point of view from the company, do you think it was right for him to make that call?
Okay, sorry, I think we did stray away a bit from your original question. Yeah, it actually was not ethical from the CEO's point of view. As you said, he didn't do his due diligence. He didn't actively engage with the community on a transparent level before making that final decision, which generally means that once you don't have the support of the community, business can't really operate in the area. So you lose confidence from stakeholders. It just leads to bad PR. So yes, the CEO did make an unethical decision. And if he was sitting in front of us, we would address this in a diplomatic manner, in the sense that going into the future, we just need to consider things a bit more and do our proper homework and research before making such decisions. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. You guys should have told me I was speaking too long.
Didn't you see the thingy?
No.
Sorry, the judges were making noises.
Neo, come back. Fuck you, man. Come here, big man.
Sorry, it's the nerves outside. They have their mics on.
We'll have yeah, we don't use laser.
So you have to hand us every person.
Yeah. Here's the laser.
What are you doing? Sit down. Sit down. Yeah. Are you guys okay?
Absolutely nervous.
There's no one even watching our thing.
No.
You can't
see the person behind the laptop.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Thanks. Are they ready? You guys ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, guys, this is the last team for the National Case Study Competition of 2017. Team Westville from Westville Boys High in KZN.
3, 2, 1, go!
Oh, that makes me relax actually because it's everyone's human. No. Just, okay, you can present that side.
One, go!
Hi, my name is Tom.
I'm Kellen. I'm Jared. And I'm Yashik.
We are Team Westville from Westville Boys High School, KwaZulu-Natal. We entered the Charter Quest Junior CFO case study competition with the hope of gaining valuable insights into the business world and to explore potential fields of study, allowing us to make informed decisions on future career paths.
The Charter Quest Junior CFO case study competition has taught us to operate more efficiently as a team and has greatly improved our problem solving and other skills, giving a taste of some of the rich Charter Quest has shown us CFO by exposing us to many difficult decisions a CFO has to make. It is therefore why we believe it is the starting point of making our dreams a reality.
And the reality is that we plan on becoming the first ever winners of the Charter Quest Junior CFO case study competition. We can only succeed to support. Every vote counts. So help us out and vote.
As Team Westville.
Good day, Board of Directors, and good day to everyone present in the room. Team Westville has once again prioritized the issues facing a mango according to urgency and impact, and our presentation will be following this order. The first issue, which we have identified as highest priority, is the corporate reconstruction and reorganization, which will be addressed by Ashik.
Due to the recent insurgence.
Keep talking.
Due to the recent resurgence in the commodity prices, the board believes that a mango will be able to restore its credit rating to investor quality. Okay, sorry. To investor quality. After doing some calculations and using a model, our team has determined that the probability of this happening is actually quite high. And it's therefore why we recommend that the mango cancels all disposals of subsidiaries. Even though a mango did not reach its target net debt of $10 billion, it did, however, reduce its medium to long-term debt by $5 billion, which is great. However, with an increase in creditors' ratings, we will be able to improve on this decrease as there will be an increase in investors and as well as an increase in confidence. By keeping all of our subsidiaries, we ensure that we make the most out of the increase in commodity prices. Although it will be cancel all the disposals, benefits resulting from an increased performance across all of our subsidiaries last year will ensure that Mango has a sustainable financial future. The money gained from our potential investors can be used to be reinvested back into our subsidiaries, and by keeping all of our subsidiaries, we ensure that a Mango does not reduce one of its key strengths, and that is having a presence in countries around the world. Next, Tom will discuss the political risk management strategy.
The new mining charter has been passed by the Minister of Mineral Resources in South Africa. And he is unhappy with the supposed window dressing techniques used by Mango in order to undermine former charters. The government is threatening sanctions if a Mango does not take firm steps towards a clean footing. Firstly, impacts of these charters on a Mango can include those by the government sanctions. Therefore, it is imperative for Mango to take firm steps towards a clean footing. They should attempt to achieve the baseline, the base BSP, which of 30%, which is included in the charter, as this will appease government sanctions. The second effect may be that of the industry capture by the Guptas. This will involve negative effects on growth and investment on the industry. Therefore, it is imperative for the business also to protect the industry, as well as support the Chamber of Mines. And this, in turn, will look after their investments in South Africa. Next, Kellen will deal with climate change and sustainable energy.
Being unable to rely on the national grid for power, Mango has decided to build its own power generation capacities. However, the South African government has pledged to a sustainability agreement, and one of its first targets is to reduce CO2 emissions by up to 20% in the following 5 years. In light of this, we recommend that Mango choose Strategy 2 and Strategy 3 for their power plans. Going forward, nuclear power would be the best option for Mango, as CO2 emissions are quite low compared to coal and gas. But we recommend that they also replace the current coal and gas power plants, because in the period between now and 5 years from now, when the nuclear plant will be built, Mango would need sufficient power in order to run all their mines properly, so that there are no injuries to miners, as well as loss of profits, as Eskom's power supply is not reliable. We also recommend that after 5 years, the 2 large coal power plants can be decommissioned. This will not affect the power supply, as by these 2 large coal power plants would be the same as the nuclear plant that will be up and running. This will also reduce CO2 emissions by 21.9%, as all 2 power plants have much higher CO2 emissions than the nuclear power plants. If we take a look at Strategy 1, that says that we build a new and on however 60, which is below the 20% required by the government. And there will also be a shortage of power in the 5 years between now and when the nuclear power plant is up and running. Jared will now discuss synergy and corporate acquisition.
Vedanta Resource Group has recently offered a bid to Mango in order to acquire 95% of Mango's holdings. Vedanta has also specified to Mango that as part of their future operations in South Africa, they will continue with absorbing the platinum and diamond subsidiaries in Mango, as well as offloading the non-copper and iron ore subsidiaries within Mango. These go against what Mango has provided for us for the future years with its respect to its financials from last year. Platinum and diamond were 2 of its best performing subsidiaries, and the commodity prices have increased. Mango has also specified that it would like to increase its investment into these subsidiaries. The copper and iron ore subsidiaries will also not be unbundled because of what we have previously recommended due to our investment crisis being resolved. Thus, by selling to Vedanta, Mango will not be able to go through with its plans for the future. So we recommend that Mango do not sell to Vedanta Resource Group. Mango's recovery from last year, or 2015, when the commodity prices dropped substantially, was enormous. Mango operated at a loss of $5 billion in 2016, but operated at a net profit of $1.9 billion in 2017. This is a major improvement for Mango's operating efficiency this year. Mango also successfully uploaded 26 non-profitable business units as well as having an 18% production increase. Our considerations with regard to this recommending of not going through with the sales was that our employees should be considered. Our employees that will be part of the subsidiaries that are sold to Vedanta may be negatively influenced by Vedanta absorbing them or offloading the subsidiaries. This could possibly create unemployment or an uncertain future for these employees. The stakeholders of Amango may also not take well to the sale, as the SA government may also not be able to impose the sanctions at once because Vedanta is a London-based company. So the BEE considerations will not be taken into account by Vedanta. Finally, our PRC relationships may be negatively impacted by our sale to Vedanta. This is because we have recently recommended not to offload many subsidiaries. However, by selling to Vedanta, they may want to unbundle a large number of these subsidiaries. So it may be potentially very negative for our relationship within South Africa. We may also be dictated to by Vedanta, and this may be negatively impacting our future operations in not only South Africa, but the country as a whole. Kellen will now deal with the group dividend, finance, and investment strategy.
There have been many debates internally in Amango as to whether shareholders will be able to get the dividends that they want if Amango is to invest in Canada. Taking into account the increase in net profit of 6%, as well as the income received from the investments in Canada and the capital expenditure, we have concluded that the dividends to shareholders will be $0.28 per share, which is below the $0.32 per share, which would be required to keep shareholders happy. We need to make shareholders aware that although short term they may not be receiving the returns that they want, by investing in Canada, we will be able to secure a better long-term returns for investors rather than a quick return now, which will make them happy, but in future won't be able to give them what they want. So, Jared will now discuss ethics.
The ethical issues associated with each scenario I've dealt with. I'll address them in order of priority. Firstly, regarding the mooted mining charter, Amango should consider the employees and initiation of a minor share buyback and consider offering shares in lieu of bonuses or salaries for some employees. Secondly, with regard to the synergy and corporate acquisition, Amango should take into consideration the employee fate of the employees after the sale of the subsidiaries to Vedanta. Thirdly, with regard to the climate change and sustainable energy, Amango should both consider the health and safety of the employees, as if they were to rely on Eskom, then it could be very unstable with regards to the energy, and the environmental concerns will be taken care of after 5 years. And finally, after group dividends, sure. So thank you for considering our recommendations.
Well done, guys. Just assuming your calculation had shown that there would be 32 cents per share for the dividend, would have you paid it or not?
Well, if we could invest in Canada and still have enough money to give the shareholders what they would be happy with, considering how for the last year or two we have not been able to provide them with dividends at all, I think, well, we should have given them the 32 cents per share.
So I've got a tag-on question.
Sorry, is your decision binary? So pay the dividend and invest?
Yes, yes. If it is possible, then we should.
Sorry, so your recommendation is that we should do both? Dividend back from 32?
Oh, yes.
Yeah? Okay, I had that question.
So I've got a question. I know you did this summary on the 4 scenarios and your strategic pieces, and then you alluded to the reconstruction and reorganization of you said any of the subsidiaries, and then very strongly forwarded then. Now there is a link between Sibanya Gold and some of the smaller subsidiary disposals and the funding from that. How are the two decisions linked, or how would you consider us moving forward from a funding to invest for that perspective?
Ma'am, so with regards to the funding for the Sibanya Gold, the case study said that we would sell our equity in Sibanya Gold in order to finance the Canada. And therefore, we believe that we should go ahead with this because it's merely an equity investment in a few of the minor subsidiaries in South Africa. And we believe that share, we should then invest this into Canada, which would have greater long-term benefits for the company because it would be greater profits and thus make our shareholders happier when they are able to achieve their 32 cents in the dollar dividends.
I want to ask two questions all at once. You are advising the board that they must support the Chamber of Mines with respect to the charter. How are you going to deal with the minister? To ask my second question so that my second question is around your choice of energy investment. You are choosing to invest in nuclear. Can you afford it?
Okay. With regards to the first question, ma'am, could you just repeat?
How are you going to deal with the minister who is advocating for a charter that you don't agree with?
Okay. Well, ma'am, in the case study, it did stipulate that the Chamber of Mines represents 40% in value of the mining sector, and therefore, due to the past charters not being followed through due to the lack of support, we believe that if this charter is going to negatively impact the mining sector due to the issues with state capture and the Gupta family, then we believe that it is in our best interest to support the Chamber of Mines. If we support the Chamber of Mines, we will be amongst the majority, and we are confident that if the entirety of the Chamber of Mines sticks together in order to prevent this charter from going through due to the negative impacts it will have on the mining sector, then we'll be a part of that majority, and ultimately it will not negatively impact Mango because the Minister of Mineral Resources will then have to impose sanctions on all of the businesses involved in the Chamber of Mines, and that would in a whole negatively impact the mining sector in South Africa. And with regards to the sustainable energy, Killen will address that question.
Your second question was how would we afford nuclear power plants? Well, if we look at nuclear power plants, I'd just like to first say that the lifespan of a nuclear power plant is around 40 years, which is much longer than coal or gas, and it's also much more sustainable, as well as for CO2 emissions, it's much lower. So in the long term, the cost it's also it costs much less to run on a daily basis. So the cost that Amango will incur if they do invest in a nuclear power plant will be much less in the long term compared to gas and coal. In terms of financing, initially financing the nuclear power plant, as we did with selling our equity to Sibanya Gold, we could also do a similar thing because in that scenario, it was selling to Sibanya to invest in Canada. And this is a similar situation where we're investing in the long term instead of short term. So,
if I may add on that, ma'am, as we have seen in the past year, even though Mango was struggling from 2015 when the commodities prices dropped substantially, we were still able last year to repay about $5 billion of our net debt, reducing it from about 16 billion to 11 billion. Thus, in the following year, Mango will be able to potentially, especially with the improved conditions, financial conditions, we believe that it will be not as difficult for a Mango to operate in these conditions and generate the income relatively quickly to be able to pay off this. We also do not have as large of a problem with regard to our debt. So we believe that there are multiple methods of financing, and because of Amango's improved position, especially with regards to investment, which we have already talked about. We believe that it'll be a lot easier for Mango to finance things that will potentially benefit our business in the future, especially with regards to energy and sustainability.
So you want us to go ahead with the Sibanye Gold transaction. You want us to continue to invest in Canada. You want us to pay a smaller dividend and give some shares to employees as part of a share scheme. If I were to push you in the corner and say, well, put you in a corner and say, well, choose your top two, because all of this looks to me as if it will require cash. What is your priority on the back of your comment around you want to maintain slow and steady growth and long-term sustainable growth as opposed to big bang in dividends and that?
Okay, well, ma'am, I think that highest priority would be the Canadian investment because, as you said, we're looking at the long term, and with the problems with the I don't know more groups and similar campaigns being resolved, we believe that having chosen Design 1 previously a year ago, this will provide a more long-term investment for Mango, and mining, obviously, in the different continents is a strength. So we would prioritize the Mango investment. We would also prioritize the paying of dividends to our shareholders, the maximum dividend that we could pay, which would not be the 32 cents in the dollar, as we would be unable to afford this, because it is of utmost importance to keep our investors happy. And by keeping them happy, it will most likely result in us being able to raise equity in the future in order to finance endeavors such as the nuclear power plants.
Tim Westville, just a question. When you were looking at the corporate reconstruction and reorganization, have you considered the ESCO analysis and what was your outcome on that?
Pardon, ma'am, please may you repeat?
Have you considered the ESCO analysis and what was your outcome?
Yes, we did. I don't know if you remember, but on my first slide, the probability was 0.9. That was our ESCO thing. That was the calculation we based our thing off. And we got to 0.9, which was less, which was greater than, no, less, yeah, greater than 0.5. And that was a high probability.
And what is your interpretation of that?
Well, as I said in the thing, in my presentation, sorry, was since it's a high probability, we should, and we got 0.9, which is actually very high, which it will mean that the chances of us getting our credit rating upgraded to investment grade again is very high, and therefore we should, yeah, not sell the subsidiaries and so on. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Great stuff. So that was a bit gutsy, telling the judge, hey man, did you not see my slide previously? What you asking me questions for? So and those are the future CFOs. The board better be careful, eh? So guys, we've come to the end, and that was our final presentation for the top three. And now obviously the big work is the judges. They have to go out there and think which team must carry the crown of 2017. We're on a tight schedule today, so what we're going to do right now is we are going to have a break, and I would like us to start at about 3 o'clock with a global competition. I will keep you informed if I'm being over optimistic. Okay, but before we leave, I just want to acknowledge something that I said yesterday. There are three things in this competition. One, there's a lot of work that goes in the background, but to get to this competition, for this competition to work, you need a case study. Okay, a lot of work has gone to there. For second thing, for this competition to work, you need the students to present. You need them to participate. We were speaking about people who didn't make it to the top 3 and they were devastated in that. And we were saying, you know what? Just by entering, you become a winner, because there are a lot of schools who didn't enter. So when you're in your top 6 and you've beaten 260 schools, you're a winner, right? So we need to encourage our students to participate. And lastly, if you don't have judges and the caliber of judges that can put these people in the real life situation, you guys just witnessed, these judges are quite hard on the questions, right? And that's what they must be, because they need to keep the standard. So I would like to give the judges a hand before they go off and they decide on who's the winner going to be. Let's give them a hand. And they must probably have to go to another boardroom to get other questions now also. So, guys, thank you very much. Thank you for participating, judges. Thank you very much for all the hard work you guys are doing. But now you still got to do one more hard work, okay? And we'll see you guys back here in about 10, 15 minutes, right? But I'll keep you informed. Thank you. You see how rough they are? Are we going to be ready? 3 o'clock. Yes. Okay, remember this time, it's going to be different. We're going to do a video of the judges. Me and Valentine are going to speak. We're going to do an introduction. You know all that, right? Did we cut it out from earlier? Hey? Did we cut it out from earlier? We did nothing. So we moved it to do it now? Yeah. Do you guys know that? No. What? The video for the judges, do you have it? I put it on that USB. So, forget about that? Yeah, but we were going to do it. Yeah, this needs to go with Sarah. Yeah, with Sarah. Remember me.
Even if we do give 10% of our turnover to these communities, we would not be losing significantly.
To Vedanta may be negatively influenced by Vedanta absorbing them or offloading the subsidiaries. This could possibly create unemployment or an uncertain future for these employees. The stakeholders of Amango may also not take well to the sale, as the SA government may also not be able to impose the sanctions at once because Vedanta is a London-based company. So the BEE considerations will not be taken into account by Vedanta. Finally, our PRC relationships may be negatively impacted by our sale to Vedanta. This is because we have recently recommended not to offload many subsidiaries. However, by selling to Vedanta, they may want to unbundle a large number of these subsidiaries, so it may be potentially very negative for our relationship within South Africa. We may also be dictated to by Vedanta, and this may be negatively impacting our future operations in not only South Africa, but the country as a whole. Kellen will now deal with the group dividend, finance, and investment strategy.
There have been many debates internally in Amango as to whether shareholders will be able to get the dividends that they want if Amango is to invest in Canada. Taking into account the increase in net profit of 6%, as well as the income received from the investments in Canada and the capital expenditure, we have concluded that the dividends to shareholders will be $0.28 per share, which is below the $0.32 per share, which would be required to keep shareholders happy. We need to make shareholders aware that although short term they may not be receiving the returns that they want, by investing in Canada, we will be able to secure a better long-term returns for investors rather than a quick return now, which will make them happy, but in future won't be able to give them what they want. So yeah. Jared will now discuss ethics.
The ethical issues associated with each scenario I've dealt with. I'll address them in order of priority. Firstly, regarding the mooted mining charter, Amango should consider the employees and initiation of a minor share buyback and consider offering shares in lieu of bonuses or salaries for some employees. Secondly, with regard to the synergy and corporate acquisition, Amango should take into consideration the employee fate of the employees after the sale of the subsidiaries to Vedanta. Thirdly, with regard to the climate change and sustainable energy, Amango should both consider the health and safety of the employees, as if they were to rely on ESCOM, then it could be very unstable with regards to the energy, and the environmental concerns will be taken care of after 5 years. And finally, after group dividends, sure. So thank you for considering our recommendations.
Well done, guys. Just assuming your calculation had shown that there would be 32 cents per share for the dividend, would have you paid it or not?
Well, if we could invest in Canada and still have enough money to give the shareholders what they would be happy with, considering how for the last year or two we have not been able to provide them with dividends at all, I think, well, we should have given them the 32 cents per share.
So I've got a tag on question.
Yes, yes. If it is possible, then we should.
Sorry, so your recommendation is that we should do both to scale the dividend back from 32.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay. I had that question.
So I've got a question. I know you did this summary on the 4 scenarios. You alluded to the reconstruction and reorganization of the business itself. You said not to dispose of any of the